In a quiet white room, a single flower fills the canvas. Its petals stretch beyond the frame, ivory dissolving into shadow, a dark center opening like a doorway. It is not delicate. It is immense, almost overwhelming. This is the world of Georgia O'Keeffe. In paintings like Jimson Weed / White Flower No. 1, a simple bloom becomes a landscape. Curves rise like dunes. Shadows deepen like canyons. The viewer is drawn inward, as though entering a silent cathedral built from petals and light. Why enlarge a flower until it feels as vast as a desert? Far away from the crowded streets of New York, under the vast sky of New Mexico, O'Keeffe would spend long hours alone, studying bones bleached by sun, red hills carved by wind, clouds drifting like slow thoughts across an endless horizon. She painted what she saw, but more than that, she painted how it felt to stand alone before something immense. Her work is often described as bold, modern, American. But beneath the scale and color lies something quieter, a search for stillness, a mind that preferred silence over noise, a woman who stepped away from expectation and built her own landscape, on canvas and in life. What shaped this solitary vision? What gave her the courage to magnify the smallest forms until they became monumental? Tonight, we move slowly into her world, into open fields, city towers, desert light, and the long interior spaces of a creative mind. If you enjoy calm, cinematic journeys into the lives of extraordinary artists, consider subscribing and gently supporting the channel. Your presence here allows these quiet stories to continue. One life, one canvas, one horizon at a time. Chapter 1. Under the Wide Wisconsin Sky. Long before the deserts of the American Southwest became her sanctuary, before the white bones and vast skies of New Mexico, there was another horizon. It stretched quietly over fields of wheat and pasture in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. Georgia O'Keeffe was born there in 1887, the second of 7 children in a dairy farming family of Irish and Hungarian descent. The land was not dramatic. It did not glow red or rise in cliffs. It rolled gently. It breathed with the seasons. Winters hardened the earth into silence. Summers softened it into green abundance. Above it all, the sky opened wide and uninterrupted. For a child inclined toward inwardness, such space was not empty. It was immense. Her parents valued discipline and education. Her mother, Ida O'Keeffe, encouraged artistic training early, arranging private drawing lessons when Georgia was still young. Yet the structure of farm life was firm. Chores, routines, expectations. Beauty did not announce itself. It had to be noticed. The sheen of milk in a pail, the geometry of fence lines, the subtle violet in evening shadows across snow. She later recalled knowing, from around the age of 10, that she would become an artist. It was not declared dramatically. It was felt, like a quiet certainty settling into place. Unlike children drawn to spectacle, Georgia seemed drawn to containment, to edges, to the way a shape sits against open air. The prairie offered few distractions. Its power was in repetition, the same fields, the same sky, changing only through light and season. In that repetition, a sensitivity formed. She learned to observe small shifts, how clouds thinned before rain, how wind flattened tall grasses into rippling patterns. The Midwestern landscape did something essential to her imagination. It trained her eye to value space as much as object. Emptiness was not absence. It was presence, waiting to be defined. Her childhood was not marked by dramatic loss or flamboyant rebellion. It was steadier than that. But steadiness can create its own kind of solitude. As one of many siblings, she learned early to carve out inward territory, a mental room of her own. The rural quiet did not suppress her imagination, it amplified it. At school, she showed aptitude in drawing. Lines came naturally. Forms felt intuitive. Yet there was little in Sun Prairie that suggested the future modernist who would one day enlarge flowers to monumental scale. No skyscrapers, no avant-garde circles, only open land, measured days, and a sky that seemed to have no end. Perhaps that is where it began. The instinct to take something small, a petal, a bone, a hill, and let it breathe against vastness. The instinct to give form to silence. As the years passed, the wide Wisconsin sky would remain with her, even when she moved east towards cities dense with ambition. Long after the prairie was behind her, its spacious logic endured in her work. Bold shapes, suspended in open fields of color, objects isolated and magnified against emptiness. Before there were flowers larger than life, there was a girl lying in tall grass, looking upward, studying how light moves across an infinite blue. Chapter 2. Learning to See Beyond Imitation. When Georgia O'Keeffe left Wisconsin, she carried with her the quiet certainty that she would become an artist. What she did not yet know was what kind of artist she would be. At 18, she enrolled at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Later, she continued her studies in New York at the Art Students League of New York. The training she received there was rigorous and traditional. Students copied plaster casts, they studied anatomy, they practiced shading until form appeared convincingly three-dimensional. Success meant accuracy, precision, faithful representation. Georgia excelled. In 1908, she won a prize for a still life painting, a conventional achievement within the academic system. By all visible measures, she was on the path to becoming a respected, realist painter. Yet something restless stirred beneath that success. Technical mastery did not quiet her mind. If anything, it sharpened a private dissatisfaction. The world, she felt, was not merely something to replicate. It was something to interpret. Financial pressures soon intervened. Unable to continue formal studies, she worked as a commercial illustrator and later as a teacher. For a period, she stopped painting altogether. The pause was not dramatic, but it was decisive. The tools of academic realism no longer felt sufficient. She needed a different language. That language began to take shape when she encountered the ideas of Arthur Wesley Dow, an artist and educator whose philosophy challenged Western conventions. Dow emphasized design over imitation, composition over realism, the harmony of line, mass, and color as the true essence of art. This was not about copying nature. It was about organizing space. Under Dow's influence, Georgia began to reconsider everything she had been taught. A painting did not have to describe a flower exactly as it appeared. It could express the rhythm of its curves. It could isolate a single line and let it vibrate against emptiness. Space itself could become active, not background, but structure. This shift was quiet but radical. During her time teaching in Texas, the vast southern plains reawakened something of her Wisconsin childhood. Open horizons, uninterrupted sky. Yet now she saw them differently, not as scenery to record, but as arrangements of tone and line. The world became abstraction, waiting to be distilled. In 1915, she created a series of charcoal drawings unlike anything she had done before. They were spare, fluid, non-representational. Dark arcs and sweeping forms moved across white paper like breath across still air. They did not describe objects. They suggested sensation. For the first time, she felt she was not imitating another artist's language. She was discovering her own. These drawings were intimate experiments, made privately, almost tentatively. But within them lay a decisive break from convention. She had stepped away from the expectation that art must explain itself through recognizable imagery. Instead, she allowed feeling to guide form. The disciplined student of Chicago and New York was becoming something else, an artist willing to reduce the visible world to its essential structure. She was no longer learning how to draw what she saw. She was learning how to see. Chapter 3. The Silence Before Recognition. By 1915, Georgia O'Keeffe was living far from the established art centers of America. She was teaching in South Carolina and later in Texas, earning a steady income but living at a remove from the currents of New York modernism. The distance was geographic, but also psychological. She had turned away from academic realism. She had absorbed Arthur Wesley Dow's compositional philosophy, yet she was still unknown. There were no galleries waiting, no patrons, no audience. In that isolation, something essential took shape. The charcoal abstractions she created in 1915 were not designed for exhibition. They were personal investigations, experiments in translating inner sensation into line and movement. Broad, curved strokes pulsed across white paper. Forms swelled and receded like breath. They carried no explicit subject matter, no flowers, no landscapes, no recognizable objects. They were, in a sense, acts of refusal. Refusal to decorate, refusal to narrate, refusal to conform. Yet the refusal was not loud. It was controlled, deliberate, quiet. Money remained a concern. Teaching required discipline and time. The demands of practical life pressed against the solitude required for experimentation. Many young artists in similar positions returned to safer, marketable styles. Georgia did not. She continued refining her abstract language privately, without assurance that it would ever be seen. The turning point came almost accidentally. A friend mailed several of her charcoal drawings to New York without her initial knowledge. They reached the hands of Alfred Stieglitz, a photographer and influential promoter of modern art. Stieglitz had already introduced American audiences to European modernists. He understood abstraction. He understood risk. When he saw her drawings, he recognized something rare. In 1916, without asking her permission, he exhibited them at his avant-garde gallery in New York. The reaction was immediate. Curiosity, intrigue, debate. The works did not resemble academic student exercises. They felt direct, personal, unapologetically modern. For Georgia, the news arrived from a distance. Her private explorations were suddenly public. This moment marked more than exposure. It marked the emergence of artistic identity. Until then, she had been a student, a teacher, a young woman experimenting in isolation. Now she was becoming a participant in a broader modernist conversation. Yet even as attention gathered, she did not abandon her inward focus. If anything, the external recognition clarified something within her. She would not paint to satisfy expectation. Her identity would not be borrowed. There was tension in this period, between economic necessity and creative autonomy, between distance and visibility, between anonymity and recognition. But tension, for O'Keeffe, did not fracture her direction. It refined it. She began to understand that her strength did not lie in competing with dominant styles. It lay in distillation, in reducing forms to their essential curves, in trusting that space itself could speak. The years of relative obscurity had been formative. They had stripped away the need for approval. They had forced her to ask what painting meant when no one was watching. By the time she moved permanently toward New York in 1918, at Stieglitz's invitation, her artistic personality was already intact. She was not arriving to be shaped by the city. She was arriving with a language of her own, spare, controlled, and unmistakably hers. The silence before recognition had not weakened her. It had defined her. Chapter 4. When the lines reached New York. In 1916, the quiet charcoal drawings made in solitude began to circulate in a space charged with debate and ambition. They appeared on the walls of 291, the small but influential gallery operated by Alfred Stieglitz in New York. The room was modest. The conversations were not. At 291, European modernism had already unsettled American taste. Cézanne, Picasso, Matisse, their names moved through the air like sparks. Abstraction was no longer unthinkable, but it was still controversial. Into this atmosphere entered the spare, flowing charcoals of Georgia O'Keeffe. They did not describe objects. They suggested movement, breath, interior states. Visitors paused. Some leaned closer, searching for subject matter. Others felt the rhythm immediately. Dark arcs rising and falling across white space. The works did not shout for attention. They drew the viewer inward. For Stieglitz, the drawings represented something distinctly American, not derivative of European cubism, not decorative, not illustrative. They carried an emotional directness that felt personal rather than theoretical. When O'Keeffe learned her work had been shown without her permission, she was startled, even unsettled. Yet she did not withdraw. Instead, a correspondence began between her and Stieglitz, letters that would gradually shift from professional admiration to intellectual intimacy. By 1918, at his urging, she moved to New York. The city was unlike anything she had known. Steel and stone rose vertically, windows stacked against sky. At night, electric light replaced the slow dimming of rural dusk. For a painter attuned to space, New York offered a different geometry, compressed, upward, intense. Her first solo exhibition took place in 1917, again under Stieglitz's guidance. Critics responded with fascination. Some described the work as lyrical. Others imposed symbolic interpretations onto the abstractions, readings she neither confirmed nor encouraged. What distinguished her early New York exhibitions was not shock value. It was coherence. Even in abstraction, her compositions felt deliberate, balanced, structured. She had absorbed Tao's principles deeply. Every line had weight, every empty area, purpose. Recognition, however, introduced complexity. Stieglitz began photographing her extensively, portraits that presented her as modern, austere, intelligent. These images circulated alongside her paintings, shaping public perception. She was becoming not only an artist, but a figure within modernist culture. Yet in the studio, she remained restrained, focused. The charcoal language gradually gave way to oil painting. Forms grew more defined. Color entered with subtle authority. The first works that attracted sustained attention were not yet the monumental flowers for which she would later be known. Instead, they were abstractions rooted in sensation, distillations of landscape, music, emotion. She explored how color could expand and contract space, how a curve could imply motion without narrative. New York provided visibility. It also demanded clarity. Within a few years, O'Keeffe's name circulated with increasing frequency in critical discussions. She was no longer an unknown teacher sending drawings from the South. She had entered the center of American modernism. And yet, even as recognition expanded, her method remained inward. She did not chase trends. She did not align herself overtly with movements. She refined her vocabulary, patiently. The lines that once lived quietly on paper had reached the city. They did not lose their silence there. They simply found an audience willing to listen. Chapter 5. Magnifying the Ordinary. By the early 1920s, Georgia O'Keeffe had moved beyond charcoal abstraction into a language of oil and color. The shift was not abrupt. It was evolutionary. Her concern remained the same: how to distill experience into form. But now, the forms became recognizable and radically enlarged. A flower, when held in the hand, is small, delicate, easily overlooked. On her canvas, it expanded until it could no longer be ignored. Works such as Black Iris filled the picture plane edge to edge. Petals curved like valleys. Shadows deepened into velvety darkness. The viewer was drawn into the interior of the bloom, confronted not with botanical accuracy, but with immersion. There was no surrounding garden, no contextual landscape, only the flower, magnified, monumental, solitary. O'Keeffe explained her intention with characteristic clarity. Most people rush past flowers without seeing them. By painting them large, she insisted they be seen. This was not exaggeration for spectacle. It was an exercise in attention. At the same time, New York itself entered her work. Skyscrapers rose in vertical precision against night skies. In paintings like Radiator Building, Night, New York, architecture becomes luminous geometry. The building stands like a column of light, stark against darkness, smoke drifting upward in measured bands. The contrast between her subjects, flowers and skyscrapers, might appear extreme. Organic curves versus industrial angles. Yet beneath the surface difference lies a consistent principle: isolation and scale. Whether petal or tower, she extracted the subject from distraction. She cropped aggressively. She removed anecdote. What remained was structure. Her style during this period grew increasingly defined by clean contours, controlled tonal gradation, simplified composition, monumental scale. She rejected painterly excess. There were no expressive brushstrokes competing for attention. Surfaces appeared smooth, deliberate, resolved. The precision reflected not coldness, but discipline. Critics took notice. Some praised her originality. Others interpreted the flower paintings through a psychological lens, reading sensual symbolism into their folds and openings. O'Keeffe resisted such interpretations firmly. She maintained that her work was about seeing, not about coded messages. Yet interpretation, once released into the public sphere, cannot be fully controlled. By the mid-1920s, her exhibitions attracted significant attention. Collectors purchased her canvases. Her name became associated with American modernism, distinct from European cubism, distinct from decorative traditions. She was developing a voice unmistakably her own. Importantly, she did not align herself with a formal movement. She avoided manifestos, avoided theoretical proclamations. Her rebellion was visual, not rhetorical. The magnified flowers did something subtle but profound within American art. They shifted focus from narrative scenes to singular forms. They invited viewers to slow down, to enter space rather than scan it. At a time when cities accelerated and modern life intensified, O'Keeffe's paintings demanded stillness. In the studio, she worked methodically. Repetition was not redundancy, but refinement. She would return to a subject, a single bloom, again and again, adjusting color temperature, deepening shadow, clarifying contour. Through repetition, she moved closer to essence. The prairie sky of her childhood had taught her about openness. New York taught her about vertical force. In the flower paintings, both lessons converged. Expansion within containment. What appears at first glance to be simplicity is, in truth, compression of observation, discipline, and will. By magnifying the ordinary, O'Keeffe was not enlarging flowers. She was enlarging perception. Chapter 6. The Weight of Interpretation. As Georgia O'Keeffe's flower paintings gained visibility in the 1920s, so too did the voices interpreting them. Exhibitions drew larger audiences, reviews multiplied. Her name began appearing regularly in discussions of American modernism. But attention is rarely neutral. Critics, predominantly male, often described her monumental blossoms in language that drifted toward the sensual. Petals were labeled intimate. Openings were called provocative. The paintings were framed not simply as formal achievements, but as expressions of femininity, sometimes even as unconscious symbolism. O'Keeffe rejected these readings with firm clarity. She insisted that a flower was a flower, that enlargement was a strategy of focus, not metaphor. She had painted what she saw, and more importantly, how she saw it. The curve of a petal was a compositional line. The dark center was tonal contrast. Space was design. Yet the cultural climate of the 1920s complicated that position. American art was still negotiating its identity. Women artists were often categorized through gender before form. Their work was described as delicate, emotional, intuitive, rarely structural or intellectual. O'Keeffe's paintings, with their clarity and control, resisted such simplifications. But the interpretations persisted. The photographs taken of her by Alfred Stieglitz added another layer. His portraits presented her as austere, modern, striking. They circulated widely, shaping a public image that intertwined artist and artwork. The boundary between persona and painting blurred. Some critics began to view her work through that image, projecting assumptions onto canvas. For O'Keeffe, this external narrative posed a quiet conflict. She valued independence. She valued precision. To have her work reduced to symbolism she did not claim felt like distortion. Yet she did not engage in public argument. She did not publish manifestos correcting critics. Instead, she continued painting. The conflict was not only interpretive, it was structural. The American art world of the interwar period was evolving rapidly. Galleries, collectors, and critics shaped careers. Visibility often required alignment with movements, with schools, with influential figures. O'Keeffe stood slightly apart. Though associated with Stieglitz's circle, she maintained artistic autonomy. Her work did not resemble cubism. It was not overtly political. It was not decorative. It was singular. Singularity can isolate. While some celebrated her as a pioneering woman in modern art, others treated her as anomaly rather than equal participant. Praise and reduction coexisted. Recognition and misreading traveled together. Yet beneath the cultural noise, her method remained steady. She returned to the studio each day with discipline. Composition came before commentary, form before interpretation. There is a particular strength required to remain silent when others speak over you. To allow the work to stand without explanatory defense. O'Keeffe possessed that strength. Rather than reacting to critics, she deepened her practice. Her flowers grew more refined, her cityscapes more distilled. She clarified edges, simplified backgrounds, amplified scale. If the world insisted on reading symbolism into her work, she would respond not with argument, but with greater precision. In the tension between artist and audience, she chose steadiness. The weight of interpretation did not bend her direction. It hardened it. Chapter 7. Fractures beneath the surface. By the mid-1920s, Georgia O'Keeffe had achieved what many artists spend a lifetime pursuing: recognition, financial stability, and a distinct visual language. Her exhibitions were well attended. Collectors sought her work. Her name circulated steadily within American modernism. And yet, beneath that stability, strain accumulated. In 1924, she married Alfred Stieglitz, her mentor, advocate, and intellectual companion. Their relationship had begun years earlier through letters, thoughtful, searching correspondence about art and perception. In many ways, their partnership was grounded in shared seriousness. Both believed art was not decoration, but revelation. But they were also profoundly different. Stieglitz was deeply embedded in New York's cultural life, social, vocal, animated by conversation and influence. O'Keeffe required solitude. She worked best in quiet. Her energy flowed inward, not outward. As the years passed, differences sharpened. Stieglitz's health began to decline. He experienced heart troubles that required care and restraint. At the same time, he formed emotional and romantic attachments to other women within his circle. The betrayals were not hidden from O'Keeffe. They unfolded within the very environment that had once nurtured her artistic rise. The emotional toll was significant. In 1933, after years of mounting pressure, professional expectations, public scrutiny, marital strain, O'Keeffe suffered a physical and psychological collapse. She was hospitalized for severe depression and nervous exhaustion. For a period, she stopped painting entirely. Silence returned to her life, but now it was heavy. For an artist whose identity had crystallized through disciplined practice, the inability to work was destabilizing. Painting had been her method of organizing the world, Without it, disorientation set in. The clarity she cultivated on canvas felt distant. Recovery was gradual. She withdrew from New York for periods of rest. The city that had once offered stimulation now felt constricting. Its vertical lines, its compressed air, its layered obligations pressed against her need for space. It was during this period of vulnerability that her connection to the American Southwest deepened. She had first visited New Mexico in 1929. The landscape struck her with immediate force. Red hills, bleached bones, endless sky. The air felt thinner, the distances wider, the quiet more complete. In contrast to New York's density, New Mexico offered expanse. The desert did not demand social performance. It did not interpret. It did not intrude. There, she began to feel her equilibrium returning. The emotional fractures of the early 1930s did not disappear. Her marriage remained complex. Stieglitz's health would continue to decline. The art world's interpretations would not cease. But in the Southwest, O'Keeffe found something elemental. Rock, bone, horizon, forms stripped of human complication. The personal turmoil she endured did not translate into dramatic confession on canvas. She did not paint her grief directly. Instead, her work became even more distilled. Fewer distractions, stronger silhouettes, clearer edges. Pain, for O'Keeffe, did not explode outward. It compressed inward, refining her vision. In moments of fracture, some artists abandon their path. Others reshape it. O'Keeffe chose the latter. The collapse of 1933 marked not an ending, but a reorientation. She began to understand that her survival, emotional and artistic, required physical distance from the center of expectation. The desert would soon become more than a retreat. It would become home. Chapter 8. The desert becomes a cathedral. When Georgia O'Keeffe returned to New Mexico after her period of illness, she did not arrive as a tourist. She arrived as someone seeking equilibrium. The first time she had traveled there, in 1929, the land had startled her, not with ornament, but with austerity. Red cliffs carved by wind, flat-topped mesas rising like quiet monuments. Sky so expansive, it seemed almost architectural. There were no skyscrapers here, no gallery openings, no expectations pressing inward. There was space. By the early 1930s, the desert was no longer a seasonal escape. It was becoming central to her vision. She spent long periods at Ghost Ranch, a remote property surrounded by rust-colored hills and pale stone formations. The land felt ancient, stripped to structure. Here, she began collecting bones. Sun-bleached skulls of cattle and deer lay scattered across the ground, remnants of animals long gone, preserved by dryness and light. Where others saw decay, she saw form. Curved horn, hollow eye socket, clean planes reduced to essential geometry. In 1931, she painted Cow's Skull, red, white, and blue. The skull floats against a field of red, white, and blue, stark, centered, monumental. It is neither macabre nor sentimental. It is direct. The bone becomes emblematic without narrative, solid against sky. Critics would later interpret the skull as a symbol of the American West, even of national identity during the Great Depression. O'Keeffe did not deny that the work emerged from American soil. But again, She resisted metaphor imposed from outside. She painted what was before her, intensified through scale and isolation. The desert sharpened her language. Color became bolder. Cobalt skies, iron-red hills, chalk-white bone. Composition simplified further. Objects hovered against open backgrounds, as if suspended in still air. The vastness of the landscape did not overwhelm her. It clarified her. Unlike the vertical compression of New York, the Southwest unfolded horizontally. The horizon line stretched uninterrupted. This expansiveness reconnected her to something earlier, the prairie skies of Wisconsin, yet now filtered through maturity and discipline. Her breakthrough in New Mexico was not a sudden stylistic shift. It was a deepening. She painted pelvis bones framing distant sky, hills reduced to rhythmic bands of color. The famous Black Place, a remote Badlands area, rendered in undulating dark forms that feel almost abstract. In each canvas, structure dominates anecdote. She removed clutter, kept only what mattered. Living part of the year in New Mexico allowed her to maintain distance from New York's interpretive noise. There were no critics walking past her studio door, no social obligations demanding explanation. The land did not misread her work. It simply existed. The solitude suited her. Days unfolded in measured quiet. She rose early, observed light shifting across rock, waited for clarity before committing to canvas. The discipline remained rigorous. The serenity was earned. In this environment, her art achieved a new level of authority. The paintings were no longer exploratory in the way the early charcoals had been. They were assured, monumental, unapologetic. The desert did not soften her style. It intensified it. By isolating bone against sky, hill against horizon, she created images that felt timeless, neither fully abstract nor strictly representational. They occupied a space between, where form becomes meditation. New Mexico was not merely a backdrop, it was structural influence. Its dryness encouraged reduction, its scale demanded boldness, its silence supported concentration. For O'Keeffe, the desert became something like a cathedral, vast, echoing, stripped of ornament, a place where the essential could stand without distraction. In that openness, she found renewal. The fractures of earlier years did not disappear, but they no longer dictated her direction. The landscape offered steadiness, and in return, she gave it permanence, transforming rock and bone into icons of American modernism. The woman who once magnified flowers now magnified emptiness, and in that emptiness, she found strength.
Chapter 9. Fame Without Company. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, Georgia O'Keeffe was no longer emerging. She was established. Her exhibitions drew sustained attention. Museums acquired her work. Critics, whether sympathetic or skeptical, acknowledged her as a central figure in American modernism. The once quiet teacher sending charcoal drawings from the South had become a name spoken with certainty. Recognition had arrived. And yet, recognition did not dissolve solitude. Her life settled into a dual rhythm, part of the year in New York with Alfred Stieglitz, part in New Mexico, where the desert offered distance from scrutiny. The two environments could not have been more different. One vertical and social, the other horizontal and silent. In New York, she attended openings, met collectors, maintained a public presence.
She was aware of her position, one of the few women recognized at the forefront of American art. Invitations arrived regularly. Interviews were requested. Her image, shaped in part by Stieglitz's photographs, circulated widely. But public acknowledgement did not translate into intimacy. O'Keeffe guarded her interior life carefully. She spoke about her work in practical terms: color, line, space, rarely indulging symbolic interpretations. She avoided theatrical statements. The mystique that surrounded her grew partly from this restraint. In New Mexico, recognition faded into background. There were no formal salons, no critics waiting. Only the studio, the land, and long stretches of uninterrupted time. She preferred this rhythm. The desert did not applaud. It did not evaluate. During these years, her reputation solidified further. In 1946, the Museum of Modern Art organized a retrospective of her work, one of the first major retrospectives granted to a woman artist there. The exhibition confirmed what many had already sensed. Her contribution was not peripheral. It was foundational. Yet even at the height of institutional recognition, she did not soften her reserve. There is a particular kind of isolation that accompanies visibility. The more an artist becomes emblematic, the more the individual risks being obscured by the image. O'Keeffe understood this. She maintained control over how she appeared, how her work was shown, how her spaces were arranged. Her homes and studios were spare, carefully composed. Recognition expanded outward. Her personal circle remained narrow. The tension between fame and solitude did not trouble her in obvious ways. She did not seek constant affirmation. What she sought was clarity. If recognition allowed her financial independence and control over her schedule, it served its purpose. Beyond that, she seemed indifferent to applause. When Stieglitz's health deteriorated in the 1940s, her time in New York grew more constrained by caregiving and obligation. The city felt heavier. The desert, more necessary.
By the time of his death in 1946, O'Keeffe had already begun preparing, quietly, for a life centered fully in the Southwest. Recognition had secured her position. It had also clarified her priorities. She would accept acknowledgement, but she would not allow it to define her. In the end, her most enduring relationship was not with critics, nor institutions, nor even the art market. It was with space, with the wide sky, the pared-down interior, the horizon unbroken by commentary. Fame had found her. She remained, fundamentally, alone with the land.
Chapter 10. The Image and the Interior. By the mid-1940s, Georgia O'Keeffe had achieved something rare. She was both a celebrated artist and a carefully constructed public presence. Her paintings were widely exhibited. Major museums acquired her work. Critics debated her place in American modernism. Yet alongside the canvases, another image circulated. The image of O'Keeffe herself. Much of that image had been shaped through the lens of Alfred Stieglitz. Over the years, he produced hundreds of photographs of her, portraits that emphasized sharp cheekbones, steady gaze, austere clothing, hands expressive yet controlled. She appeared modern, disciplined, self-contained. These photographs were not casual snapshots. They were composed studies, and as they entered exhibitions and publications, they began to merge with public perception of her art. The woman and the work intertwined. O'Keeffe understood this dynamic. She was not naive about visibility. She selected how she dressed, often in black or white, forms clean and unadorned.
Her homes in New York and later in New Mexico were arranged with similar restraint. Spare furniture, open walls, carefully placed objects. Even her living spaces echoed her compositional logic. Everything unnecessary was removed. Outwardly, she appeared composed, almost severe. Interviews revealed a measured voice. She declined to indulge symbolic interpretations of her flowers. She corrected critics gently but firmly. She insisted on discussing form rather than psychology. Yet interior life rarely aligns perfectly with exterior control. The years of emotional strain in her marriage, the collapse of 1933, the long negotiations between independence and partnership, all of these belonged to a private sphere she did not publicize. Even after Stieglitz's death in 1946, she did not convert grief into spectacle. Instead, she turned inward. Following his death, she moved permanently to New Mexico. The desert became not only inspiration, but structure. She purchased and restored an adobe house in Abiquiú. Thick walls, small windows, courtyard open to sky. The architecture suited her temperament, contained, geometric, calm. Her public reputation continued to grow, but geographically, she had stepped away from the center of the American art world. New York's debates intensified, new movements forming, younger artists experimenting with increasingly gestural abstraction. O'Keeffe remained physically distant from these developments. There is a paradox in her later middle years. As her name became firmly embedded in art history, her daily life grew simpler, more isolated. The inner and outer worlds diverged. Outwardly, exhibitions, catalogue essays, institutional recognition. Inwardly, morning walks in desert light, collecting stones, arranging bones on tables, studying the way shadows moved across adobe walls. Her paintings during this period reflect that duality.
Some works retain bold monumentality. Others become more pared down, almost meditative. She no longer needed to prove originality. That phase had passed. Instead, she refined. The public saw icon. She experienced routine. The discipline that had defined her since childhood, the insistence on clarity, on independence, allowed her to manage this divergence. She did not allow fame to dictate subject matter. She did not adapt her style to align with emerging trends. She maintained continuity. Control, for O'Keeffe, was not rigidity. It was survival. By shaping her public image deliberately, she protected the interior space required for work. By simplifying her surroundings, she shielded herself from distraction. By refusing to explain excessively, she preserved mystery. In the quiet rooms of her adobe house, the woman behind the photographs remained attentive to the same essential questions that had guided her since youth. How does space hold form? How does light alter structure? How can stillness be made visible? The world might debate her meaning. She continued to paint her own. Chapter 11. After the Long Partnership. In 1946, Alfred Stieglitz died in New York at the age of 82. For nearly 3 decades, his presence had shaped the professional and emotional landscape of Georgia O'Keeffe's life. Their partnership had been complex, intellectually sustaining, personally strained, deeply formative. With his death, a chapter that had defined much of her adult life closed quietly. There was no dramatic public display of grief. Instead, there was transition.
In the months that followed, O'Keeffe settled Stieglitz's estate, organized his photographs, and oversaw the preservation of his legacy with characteristic discipline. The work was meticulous, practical. It required attention rather than emotion. Yet beneath the administrative tasks lay an undeniable shift. She was now entirely on her own. New York, once a site of ascent and recognition, felt increasingly distant. Without Stieglitz, the city's gravitational pull weakened. Its galleries, its social circles, its dense cultural arguments, all seemed less essential to her daily rhythm. She chose permanence elsewhere. By the late 1940s, she moved fully to New Mexico, dividing her time between Ghost Ranch and her home in Abiquiú. The adobe walls, the enclosed courtyard, the vast desert beyond. These spaces became not seasonal retreat, but center. Grief, for O'Keeffe, did not manifest in overt sentimentality. It appeared instead as further simplification. She pared down possessions, streamlined routines, reduced social engagement. The energy once required to balance partnership and independence now flowed entirely into her own direction. Age, too, began to assert itself. She was approaching 60. Though still vigorous, she could not ignore physical limits entirely. The desert climate suited her, but it also demanded resilience. Long walks across uneven ground required strength. Painting on large canvases required stamina. Yet there was no visible retreat from work. If anything, the post-1946 period brought renewed clarity. Without the need to divide her time between coasts, she immersed herself fully in the southwest landscape. She observed seasonal changes in light, studied the geometry of doorways and hills, collected stones as carefully as she once collected bones. The art world beyond New Mexico was shifting rapidly. Younger artists in New York were pushing abstraction toward explosive gesture. Paintings grew larger, more aggressive, more openly expressive. Critics began speaking of a new American dominance in modern art. O'Keeffe remained apart from this turbulence. Her strength had never been spectacle. It was control, precision, reduction. The death of Stieglitz marked not only personal loss, but also the end of an era in American modernism. The intimate circle of early 20th century avant-garde had dissolved. A new generation was taking the stage. O'Keeffe did not compete for attention within that changing environment. She conserved energy. She focused on what had always sustained her: horizon, bone, cloud, wall. The partnership that once amplified her entry into the art world had ended, but she had long since grown beyond dependency. The years of tension, illness, and recovery had forged independence into necessity. Now, alone in the desert, she faced the later decades of life without intermediary. The light remained. She turned toward it. Chapter 12. A New Generation Rises. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, the center of gravity in American art had shifted decisively. New York was no longer looking toward Europe for validation. It was generating its own movement, bold, gestural, unapologetically large. Abstract expressionism emerged with force. Painters such as Jackson Pollock covered canvases with dripped skeins of paint. Others, like Mark Rothko, built vast fields of color that hovered like luminous atmospheres. The rhetoric surrounding art intensified. Critics spoke of existential struggle, raw emotion, heroic scale. The studio became arena. In comparison,
The work of Georgia O'Keeffe appeared controlled, measured, almost restrained. Where Pollock's canvases captured motion in explosive arcs, O'Keeffe's surfaces remained smooth and deliberate. Where younger artists embraced visible brushwork as psychological trace, she continued refining contour and clarity. Her paintings did not dramatize process, they concealed it. The contrast was stark. Critics began positioning abstract expressionism as the defining American style: energetic, masculine, unbounded. O'Keeffe, though already established, was sometimes framed as belonging to an earlier chapter, a precursor rather than participant. Yet she did not react publicly. From her home in New Mexico, she observed these developments at a distance. Newspapers and magazines carried reproductions. Occasional trips east reintroduced her to the expanding scale of contemporary exhibitions. But she did not adapt her vocabulary to match the new rhetoric. She had never been aligned with movements. Her work was not theoretical argument. It was concentration. There is a temptation, in the face of generational change, to either compete or withdraw entirely. O'Keeffe chose neither extreme. She continued working, attentive to her own evolution rather than to prevailing trends. If abstract expressionism emphasized gesture, she emphasized structure. If the new school prized spontaneity, she valued deliberation. This divergence did not signal stagnation, it signaled fidelity. In the 1950s, she began exploring new perspectives within her own language. She traveled more widely, including flights over vast American landscapes. From airplane windows, she observed clouds from above, fields patterned like fabric, rivers reduced to thin lines across Earth. These experiences did not transform her into a gestural painter. Instead, they expanded her sense of scale once more. Meanwhile, the art market shifted. Galleries promoted younger names. Critics invested their essays in the rhetoric of rupture. O'Keeffe's place in history was secure, but she was no longer at the volatile center of innovation. For some artists, such repositioning breeds insecurity. For O'Keeffe, it clarified autonomy. She had built her practice on independence from interpretation, independence from trend.
The rise of abstract expressionism reinforced that independence rather than undermining it. She did not need to compete with splashes of paint or declarations of artistic revolution. Her revolution had already occurred, quietly, decades earlier, when she magnified a flower until it demanded attention. The art world's spotlight had shifted direction, but the desert light remained consistent. While New York debated gesture and scale, O'Keeffe studied horizon and sky. While critics declared new epochs, she refined her own. Change, she understood, was constant. But essence, once discovered, required patience, not noise. Chapter 13. The Sky Above the Clouds. In the 1950s and 1960s, as she moved deeper into later life, Georgia O'Keeffe did not contract her vision. She expanded it. Air travel, still relatively novel and quietly luxurious, offered her a new vantage point. From airplane windows, she watched the earth dissolve into abstraction. Fields became geometric patches, rivers thinned into lines, and above the land, clouds formed continuous landscapes, white upon white, stretching to the horizon without interruption. Where once she had stood beneath the sky, she now looked across it. This shift in perspective led to one of her most distinctive late series, the Sky Above Clouds paintings. In works such as Sky Above Clouds 4, the canvas becomes an expansive field of soft, repeating cloud forms,
extending toward a pale blue distance. There is no dramatic focal point, no singular object commanding attention. Instead, there is rhythm. Rows of rounded cloud shapes move steadily across the surface. The repetition is not mechanical. Each form holds subtle variation, shadow, highlight, density. The composition suggests infinity, as if the painting could continue beyond its frame. These works differ from her earlier flower paintings in subject, yet they share essential principles: isolation, enlargement, immersion. Once, she magnified a single bloom until it filled the viewer's field of vision. Now, she magnified atmosphere itself. The sky became terrain. The clouds became architecture. Critics responded with mixed reactions. Some saw the series as a serene culmination. Others perceived detachment, even coolness. Compared to the emotional rhetoric dominating mid-century abstraction, her cloud paintings appeared restrained, almost meditative. But restraint was never absence of feeling for O'Keeffe. It was concentration. Technically, the late works required physical endurance. Some canvases were monumental in size. Stretching, priming, and painting large surfaces demanded energy from a body now entering its 70s. Yet she persisted, adjusting her working methods as needed. Color in these paintings softened. Pale blues, gentle whites, faint pink undertones. The palette evoked altitude, thin air, filtered light. Unlike the saturated reds of New Mexico cliffs or the dark centers of irises, the Sky series feels lighter, more open. There is also a sense of perspective gained, literal and metaphorical. To look down upon clouds is to detach from the ground. It suggests distance from daily entanglements, from grief, from rivalry, from the noise of art world debates. The late paintings carry that altitude. They feel less concerned with interpretation, more absorbed in continuity. Meanwhile, her life in New Mexico remained structured and spare. She maintained her adobe house in Abiquiú with meticulous care. Objects were arranged deliberately. Stones collected from the desert were placed along windowsills. Light moved across walls as if choreographed. Her days followed rhythm rather than schedule. Morning observation, afternoon work, evening quiet. If earlier chapters of her career had revolved around asserting identity, as woman, as modernist, as independent voice, the late works suggest something else. Integration. The sky above clouds is neither personal confession nor public statement. It is observation, distilled to vastness. There is humility in these paintings. The artist does not dominate the subject. She participates in its scale. The horizon line remains distant. The repetition suggests continuity beyond human presence. Age had not reduced her ambition. It had refined its direction. Where once she magnified the intimate, she now magnified the infinite. The clouds roll outward in quiet procession, and in their steady rhythm, one senses not decline, but expansion. Chapter 14. The Quiet House in Abiquiú. In the later decades of her life, as recognition solidified and exhibitions multiplied, Georgia O'Keeffe did something that seemed almost contradictory. She withdrew. Not dramatically, not bitterly, simply deliberately. Her adobe house in Abiquiú in northern New Mexico became both sanctuary and filter. The thick earthen walls held the desert's temperature in careful balance. Windows were positioned like frames, each one composing the outside world into a living painting. A door opening onto the courtyard, a slice of mesa in the distance, a stretch of pale sky resting above low hills. She arranged objects inside with the same restraint she applied to canvas. A single chair, a table cleared of clutter, a bone placed precisely along a windowsill. Nothing accidental, nothing excessive. By the 1960s and 1970s, the art world had shifted again. Pop art, minimalism, conceptual art, movements driven by irony, systems, industrial aesthetics dominated critical discourse. Younger artists moved toward theory, toward urban culture, toward mass imagery. O'Keeffe remained in the desert. She was not unaware of contemporary trends. Major retrospectives, including the 1946 exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, had already secured her place in American art history. Museums collected her work, scholars debated her symbolism, journalists made the pilgrimage west. But she controlled access carefully. Visitors were received on her terms, interviews were limited, photographs were staged with precision. She understood image, not only on canvas, but in public life. The wide-brimmed black hat, the long dark garments, the angular posture against the pale desert. She allowed no casual intrusion into her constructed simplicity. Meanwhile, her eyesight began to deteriorate. Macular degeneration gradually blurred the clarity that had once defined her work. Edges softened, detail became difficult. For an artist whose practice depended upon acute observation, of contour, of spatial relationships, of tonal shift, the loss was not minor. It was existential. Yet even here, she did not surrender to despair. She adapted. Assistants helped prepare canvases. She worked with clay. She explored media that required different tactile engagement. Creation did not stop. It changed form. The late paintings grew increasingly spare, large areas of subtle color, horizon lines simplified, architectural forms reduced to essentials. The desert, always central, became even more distilled, less descriptive, more atmospheric. There is a feeling in these works of expansion paired with quiet acceptance, not the urgency of youth, not the assertion of mid-career defiance, but steadiness. Her daily life in Abiquiú followed ritual precision. She rose early, ate simply, walked when she could, observed light as it shifted across the courtyard walls. The desert does not hurry, it unfolds. She had aligned her rhythm with its pace. She rarely returned to New York. The skyscrapers that once compelled her vertical abstractions felt distant now. The canyon walls of the city had given way to real stone cliffs. The artificial light of studios had been replaced by open sky. And yet, the discipline forged in those earlier years remained intact. She approached aging as she approached composition, by reducing to what mattered. Visitors often expected dramatic pronouncements about art, feminism, symbolism. Instead, they encountered economy of speech. She resisted interpretation imposed from outside. When critics insisted her flower paintings were coded erotic imagery, she dismissed the readings. She had painted what she saw. Others were free to project. Control over space, narrative, access defined this period. The house itself became an extension of her aesthetic. Photographs taken inside reveal a near monastic interior. White plaster walls, dark beams, carefully placed objects. It was not emptiness. It was intentional space. In Abiquiú, she was no longer negotiating position within the art world. That negotiation had been completed decades earlier. Now she guarded something more internal: clarity. As health gradually declined, mobility decreased. Travel became rare. Assistants managed increasing responsibilities. But even as physical energy diminished, the environment she had shaped remained constant. A door opening to sunlit earth, a mesa turning red at dusk, a sky wide enough to hold silence. In the final stretch of her life, there were no grand gestures, no dramatic returns to public debate, no late career reinventions meant to shock. Instead, there was containment. A woman who had once magnified flowers to monumental scale now lived within carefully measured walls. Walls that framed the vastness outside. The contrast was not contradiction. It was balance. Inside, order. Outside, infinity. And between them, still attentive, still exacting, still present, Georgia O'Keeffe.
Chapter 15. The Last Horizon. In the final years of her life, the desert remained constant. The house in Abiquiú stood against the vast openness of New Mexico, its adobe walls absorbing heat by day and releasing it slowly at night. Light still entered through carefully chosen windows. The courtyard still held its geometry of shadow and sun. But inside, time was narrowing. By the 1970s, Georgia O'Keeffe was nearly blind. Macular degeneration had reduced the sharpness that once defined her perception. The precise edges she had relied upon, the curve of a petal, the clean horizon of a mesa, the crisp line of a bone against sky, blurred into softness. For a painter whose art depended on disciplined seeing, this was not merely a physical condition. It was a transformation of identity. Yet she did not retreat into silence entirely. With the assistance of trusted companions, including the much younger ceramic artist Juan Hamilton, she continued to shape forms in clay. Working three-dimensionally allowed her to engage through touch rather than sight. Her hands learned what her eyes could no longer confirm. There is something deeply consistent in this adaptation. O'Keeffe had always reduced the world to essential structure: bone, line, horizon. Sculpture was simply another way of tracing form. Visitors still made the journey west. Interviews were occasionally granted. A major retrospective in 1970 at the Whitney Museum of American Art reaffirmed her position within the canon of American modernism. She had long outlived many of her contemporaries. Movements had risen and faded. Critical fashions had shifted. She remained. Not loudly, not polemically, but undeniably. The world around her had accelerated. Politically turbulent decades, rapidly expanding media, the globalization of the art market. Yet within the walls of her desert home, routine prevailed. Morning light, measured meals, the sound of wind moving across open land. Aging did not soften her independence. She maintained control over her estate, her public image, and the narrative surrounding her work. Even as physical dependency increased, intellectual authority did not diminish. She had spent a lifetime defining her own terms. She would not relinquish them at the end. There was no dramatic reconciliation with the art world, no final manifesto, no public declaration summarizing meaning. Instead, there was continuity. The desert mesas she had painted decades earlier still shifted color at dusk. Rose, violet, deepening red. The sky still opened into immeasurable blue. Even without clear vision, she knew their presence. Space had long ago become internal. On March 6, 1986, at the age of 98, Georgia O'Keeffe died in Santa Fe. The announcement was restrained. There was no spectacle. Those close to her described a quiet passing. Her body, like the bones she once collected and studied, returned to the earth she had chosen as home.
In accordance with her wishes, Her ashes were scattered over the landscape of northern New Mexico, over hills and desert expanses she had painted repeatedly, from shifting perspectives across decades. There is a certain symmetry in this. The land that entered her work became the land that received her. No grand mausoleum marks the place. No towering monument interrupts the horizon. Only open space. In her final chapter, she was not the bold young modernist challenging convention in New York. She was not the newly discovered abstractionist sending charcoal drawings to a photographer who would change her life. She was not the painter of monumental flowers confronting critics' projections. She was simply a woman who had chosen her terrain carefully and stayed. The discipline remained until the end. The preference for clarity, the refusal of excess, the insistence on direct experience over interpretation. If one stands in Abiquiú at dusk, watching light withdraw slowly from adobe walls, it becomes easier to understand her late quietude. The desert does not end dramatically. It fades. Color thins. Edges soften. Heat releases into cool air. The horizon does not close. It recedes. And somewhere in that wide distance, beyond canvas, beyond gallery walls, beyond biography, the space she studied for nearly a century continues unchanged. The last horizon was not a wall. It was sky. Epilogue. The space she left open. Long after her death, the rooms in Abiquiú remain almost as she arranged them. Light enters through a single window. A wooden chair stands at measured distance from the wall. Outside, the desert of New Mexico stretches toward low mesas and an uninterrupted horizon. The space feels intentional, neither decorated nor empty, but composed. So was her life. Georgia O'Keeffe altered the scale of American painting. She enlarged the overlooked, a flower, a bone, a hill, until it demanded attention. She helped define a distinctly American modernism, spare, luminous, grounded in landscape rather than European tradition. In 1946, when the Museum of Modern Art honored her with a retrospective, the first for a woman artist there, it marked more than institutional recognition. It marked a shift in the narrative of who could shape modern art. Today, her works reside in major collections across the United States and beyond. The desert forms she painted continue to influence generations of artists exploring scale, abstraction, and the relationship between body and landscape. Her home and studio in Abiquiú have become a site of quiet pilgrimage, preserved by the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in nearby Santa Fe. Yet statistics and exhibitions explain only part of her endurance. What remains most powerful is her discipline of attention. She taught viewers to look longer, to see structure in simplicity, to recognize that vastness can exist within a single petal and intimacy within an open sky. If this journey through her life brought you a moment of stillness tonight, you are always welcome to return. These stories unfold slowly, like desert light at dusk, and there are many more horizons ahead. Until our next quiet chapter, rest well.